My name is Winnie Mwaniki. I work for IDH. I'm in charge of our landscapes program in Kenya in the Southwest Mau, which is what we are going to be discussing this afternoon. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the session. Although it's IDH hosting this discussion forum, this is really going to be our partners discussing the experiences we've had so far with implementing the landscape work on the ground. So yeah, it will be about the practical work we have been doing so far. To start us off, our director, Jody Van Honk, is going to give us a little story about his experience in Kenya. He's been working here for the last 8 years and has a personal story to explain how we got to this point. After that, we will watch a short video. And thereafter, we will have Christian from the executive director of Rhino Arc, zooming out a bit of the landscape in the Southwest Mau to talk about more the national level work that Rhino Arc does across the different forest ecosystems in Kenya, and why what we are doing in the Mau is very interesting for us going forward. And then my colleague, Dr. Langat, will be hosting. Dr. Langat chairs our board. Dr. Langat is a trustee. He's our stakeholder manager. He's going to be hosting a discussion forum. We have left half an hour at the end for a question and answer session. So please keep your questions ready. We will have one for you too, and we are looking forward to a really interesting discussion. Mr. Van Honk?
Thank you, Winnie, and good afternoon all. Winnie challenged me a bit for this session, so she said, can you give an introduction to the Global Landscapes Program of IDH? And then I thought, well, maybe that would be a bit theoretical and a bit boring. So I thought, let me start just with where Winnie and my journey started together, and that was in a little while ago, in 2010, when actually Winnie was still having another job. She worked for the Rainforest Alliance. She's here she's a bit incognito, wearing a large hat. And actually myself, I just joined IDH. I was on the job for 2 weeks, and they immediately sent me out to the tea fields in Kenya. And what was IDH about at that time? So IDH stands for the Sustainable Trade Initiative. We're a global organization headquartered out of the Netherlands. And we were about market transformation of supply chains. So we got support from multiple European governments, very prominently the Dutch government, also Swiss and Danish governments at that time. And they asked us to help with working together with the private sector to transform markets. For tea, that meant at that time rolling out what we call third-party certification. Rainforest Alliance, UTZ, Fairtrade, they were all in the beginning, one bit older than the other. But it was felt that a solution to many of the sustainability problems in supply chains was rolling out of certification. So there I was in the tea field doing that job. And that was exactly our job. As IDH, we orchestrated implementation, worked with partners who would actually do the job, but we would help in getting the private sector investments in. So our program was with Unilever, the largest tea buyer in the world, and with KTDA, the largest tea producer in the world, Kenyan Tea Development Agency. They're both present here and we'll speak later. And it was about rolling out certification from large tea plantations in the world to smallholder farmers in the world, specifically here in Kenya. On-farm interventions, sustainable agriculture. We had a great journey. In over 4 years, 560,000 tea farmers of KTDA were certified. Almost the entire country of Kenya was certified. And globally, we have reached, I think, between 20 and 30% of global tea production to be certified. So you would say, great, even field level impact on farm, huge changes in behavior of smallholder farmers, taking into account sustainable agricultural practices. We saw impact on riparian strips, all of that. At that time, we also found that that wasn't enough. There was a lot of criticism coming to that wouldn't be the end of the journey. So 4 years later, I've suddenly found myself well, I think it was 2015, so 5 years later, suddenly found myself planting a tree. So why would I plant a tree? My job was something else, right? So we actually, towards the end of the first program, where we have reached these 560,000 farmers and 100,000 farmers directly in our training programs, we actually were told that the malforest was still disappearing. So all these on-farm certification efforts in Kenya, in the tea industry in Kenya, huge industry, it's the largest foreign exchange earner in this country, beating tourism for a few years now. Basically, it wasn't enough. The malforest was disappearing. And the tea industry called for action. They said, IDH, can you also help us in doing off-farm multi-stakeholder work in fighting for the malforest, protecting, restoring the malforest. And there it began. Within a time span of 1.5 years, we built the program. And I recall one very particular day, that was with Simeon Hutchinson, who will speak later, the managing director of Finley is here present. When I was called from my head office, and at that time I lived in Nairobi, very close by, to scope a landscape program. I was thinking like, yeah, okay, but what is that actually? And so they said, well, go and talk to the partners and find out what the issues are of the malforest. So I got introduced to Simeon, I visited him, I think it was on a Saturday, and when I arrived on his beautiful tea plantation in Kericho, he said, do you have something to do on Sunday? Because our official meetings were going to start on Monday. And I said, no, of course not, I have nothing to do. So he said, would you mind flying over the forest? Because then I can immediately show you what the issues are. So that's what he did. He flew me over the forest. He can fly himself, it's also handy. And then by the end of that flight, to me it was very clear what the issue was. There was lots of activities in the forest which was encroached from the other side than the tea plantations were bordering the forest. And we will hear more about that. So it became, the concept of landscape development became very real for me, because then immediately from the sky you could see that with only the tea plantations bordering one side of the forest, we wouldn't win this battle. We needed to work with all partners involved. So also with we brought together the KenGen, which is a big hydropower electricity company in this country, the timber loggers, etc., etc., etc. But we built it from our strong base, which were our connections to the global businesses of Unilever, Finley's, and KTDA, which is a gigantic company in this country, uniting 560,000 tea farmers. Now, that was a bit of the personal story. Zooming out a bit, since then IDH has developed itself heavily into landscapes. We have grown in our understanding of how to work on it, and we have developed a concept which we like to call PPI, Production, Protection, Inclusion Compacts. So these are compacts at the local level involving all relevant stakeholders, and for us always crucial to involve business, to involve government, and to involve local communities. Together with civil society and increasingly finance sector as well. And of course, these national governments play a key role here as well. So we, at the local level, we try to develop what we call compacts, where the stakeholders agree which part of the landscape can be dedicated to production. So not to say that you can't produce anymore in a landscape. So where do we focus on intensifying production, making sure that production is sustainable? But where do we also agree we need to protect forest? And where are we actually going to heavily focus on increasing livelihoods so that this is actually carried forward by the communities? We call this PPI context. Then the job of IDH is linked that to supply chains. So this is where our strength comes in. We have connections with all global multinational companies, with the ones that are actually quite heavily building on no deforestation commitments, etc. So we link it to the supply chain. And we increasingly link this to green growth plans of governments. So we have been doing that in over 10 landscapes now, and we're building this experience. To us, it's key that if we have the compacts in place, if we have the linkages and the blessing of the government, that finance comes in. Because with grant money alone, we're not going to win this battle. We're already told in the plenary how much money every landscape needs to be restored. Willem Verreda, very known landscape developer in the Netherlands, says for every landscape you might need around 2 billion to really get it going, and you need 20 years. So we need these investors to come in. That's also where IDA is definitely working on with multiple partners as well. So for my initial visit to a tea plantation in Kericho and all the developments with my colleagues, we have grown our portfolio now to 10 landscapes. Very exciting journey. Most of our landscapes are now 2 years in implementation. But I would say our most advanced landscape implementation experience is the Southwest Mao, and we were very happy to share that with you. And we're very grateful to all our partners for this exciting journey, for your commitment, and also for your willingness to share it with us today and with all the people here. Thank you. Shall I announce Christian? And now Christian, oh no, we have the movie, sorry. I should let that to you, right?
Thank you. Thank you, Jordi, for that inspiring presentation.
Okay, many thanks, Winnie, and good afternoon, everybody. Once again, my name is Christian Lambrex. I'm the Executive Director of RANWAC, which is a trust established in Kenya 30 years ago. And I'm also a partner of IDH ISLA, aiming at supporting the initiative towards restoring the landscape around Southwest Mao. But my small talk today is not specifically about Southwest Mao. It's actually to provide you first a broader overview about what has happened in Kenya with regards to the protection of forest landscape. Where are we coming from? And then to give you some further insight about what's happening across the entire Mao forest complex. Now, as you all know, Kenya has been and still very famous for its wildlife. For many people from outside, open savanna and wooded savanna with a lot of wildlife and the big five is actually the image that they have. And they are talking about the very large Tsavo ecosystem, the Masai Mara. We are talking here about the drier Samburu. In northern Kenya, we are talking about Lake Nakuru. Those are usually the image that most Kenya have when we speak about Kenya. But if you were to take a small aircraft and if you were to cross the entire Kenyan landscape, you will be struck by some key features that you are going to see. And those are Kenya Mountain and Kenya Mountain Range. And we have, to just mention some of the large ones, we have Mount Kenya and the Aberdares in central Kenya. And then when you look west of the Rift Valley, you will see the Mao Forest Complex and the Cherangani Hills. And then when you go further to the west, on the border between Kenya and Uganda, you will see Mount Elgon. Those mountain areas are covered with forest. And amazing enough, they form the upper catchment of all main rivers in this country. As such, those mountain areas, although quite not well known by people coming from outside, they're actually supporting the forests that provide most of the water being used in these nations. This is the water that we use in most urban areas. This is the water that goes to all irrigation schemes. This is the water that feeds all the hydropower plants installed in this country. If you look at those mountain areas, you will see that they are surrounded by the most densely settled areas because they provide and they create the microclimate conditions which are ideal for crops productions. In addition to that, there are also the lifelines of key conservation areas. Actually, those rivers are crossing the Masai Mara Serengeti ecosystems. They're also providing the water to Lake Nakuru, which is one of the most visited protected areas in this country. But they are also those rivers are also transboundary water bodies, and they reach out to Tanzania, they reach out to Ethiopia, they reach out to the large Nile basin ecosystems through various lakes that they are feeding. So you will say, and probably you will be thinking, wow, actually, those 5 main water towers that very few people have been realizing from before, that actually they are so important, should be due to their importance very well protected in this country. But sadly enough, for many decades, those mountain ecosystems, those forest ecosystem in the mountain, has been managed from a very narrow forestry perspective, very much focused on timber extractions. In addition to that, quite often those forest land has been perceived as idle land, and as such, they have been converted into other use, in particular settlements and agriculture. And actually, if you look at what has happened in the 1990s, you will see that every year we were losing over 5,000 hectares of forest land due to land conversions. And what has happened is that most of the critical function that those ecosystems were providing to the nation were just taken for granted. People were used to have water flowing from those ecosystems, and they didn't see the relationship between those forests and the water flowing in those rivers. It was actually all taken for granted. But some 15 years ago, increased public awareness and actually public outcry about forest destruction led the government of Kenya to actually realize that the management framework managing those forests was not appropriate. And quite a number of major initiatives were being taken, starting with the enactment of the new Forest Act in 2005. And that Forest Act was quite critical because it made almost impossible to excise forest land and to convert forest land to other uses. In addition to that, it made key to involve all stakeholders in the management of those forest ecosystems. 2 years later, the Kenya Forest Service was being established with a key role to spearhead the implementation of the Forest Act. And then the same year, interesting enough, Kenya launched Vision 2030. This is the blueprint for this nation to become industrialized middle-income nations. And amazing enough, when the plan was being launched, there were 5 key flagship projects. And one of them was the restoration of Kenya 5 water towers. So clearly, Kenya as a nation and the government itself really took full realization of the importance of Kenya water towers and start laying out plans to make sure that they are properly conserved and restored. Now, in parallel to that, there have been quite a number of public-private partnership initiatives that were initiated in those mountain ecosystems. One in the Aberdares, actually led by RANWAC, my organization, and also one in Mount Kenya led by the Mount Kenya Trust. And quite soon, it proved that those PPPs has actually become very successful and were able to deliver quite amazing outcome. And I will just try to give you a sense about what happened in those ecosystems. With regards to the Aberdares, 20 years after that partnership was being established, a major assessment was being undertaken. And actually one of the key partners of that assessment was the UN Environment Programme where we are here hosted. And what the report noted is that thanks to that PPP, 23% of the forest cover in the Aberdare increased. So we had actually a major change across one of the largest mountain ecosystems here in Kenya. Now, similar improvements were also noted on Mount Kenya, where a PPP setup or PPP approach was being initiated. Actually, in 1999, just to give you a sense about what happened, in 1999, I was taking part in an aerial survey above all the forests of Mount Kenya. And it was being done with a former senior warden of Mount Kenya National Park. And during the survey, we noted, and actually we flew 56 hours alongside parallel transect, looking at all illegal activities in the ecosystems. And we noted extensive illegal settlements in the forest, and we noted that illegal logging activities were taking place across the entire forest belt, up to 20 kilometers inside the forest of Mount Kenya. Now, new PPP arrangement has been set up, management change has been established, and currently we are undertaking periodic surveillance flight above the same forest of Mount Kenya. And amazing enough, all the illegal settlements have been removed, and we can only count very few logging sites in the forest of Mount Kenya. So it became very clear that actually those PPP arrangements being set up in the Aberdares and on Mount Kenya actually has proven very successful in triggering positive changes in the management and the outcome of those ecosystems. And this is not just about those large mountain ecosystems. I can also speak about Karura Forest, which is just the forest neighboring the UN complex where we are here. You know, in the past, and I've been living here in Nairobi for many years, in the past, Karura Forest was being known as a hiding ground for thugs and a dumping site for dead bodies. Today, it is the most visited forest in the country. And it has been transformed through a PPP arrangement between Friends of Karura Forest and the Kenya Forest Service. But at the same time, if we go back to the Mau Forest Complex, which, as you know, now is one of the main water towers of Kenya, actually is the largest of all of them, the situation is quite different. Forest destruction continued in an unabated way. And in less than 2 decades, as you have seen in the film from IDH Isla, 25% of the forest cover in the Mau Forest Complex was being destroyed. Now, to realize how important it is, you have to realize that the Mau Forest Complex is the source of 13 major rivers in the country. And those rivers provide most of the water to the communities living west of the Rift Valley. They provide water to critical conservation areas, I already mentioned them, the Serengeti and Masai Mara ecosystems, Lake Nakuru and many others. And also they provide water to international bodies like Lake Victoria, like Lake Magadi, which is sitting on the boundary between Tanzania and Kenya, as well as to Lake Turkana, which is on the boundary between Kenya and Ethiopia. And just to build upon what has just been mentioned in the presentation by IDH Isla, in addition to that, the Mau Forest Complex provides the ideal microclimatic conditions for optimum tea growth that has made that the largest tea growing areas is now to be found in Kericho next to the Mau Forest Complex. Now, despite all of that, the Mau was in crisis. And in order to address that crisis and to restore the Mau, in 2008, the government of Kenya decided to establish a task force. And that was actually established by the then Prime Minister. Now, the work of the task force has been instrumental in actually highlighting the plight of the Mau Forest Complex. I do recall those days where everybody in the country, every single taxi driver you were traveling with, were talking about the conservation of the Mau. And clearly, that was one of the major outcomes of that task force. But at the same time, they nevertheless realized to safeguard and to restore 25,000 hectares of forest in the Mau. That was just 1/5 of all what was to be restored and recovered in the Mau. But they couldn't go any further, and still much was to be done. What came clear at the time is that the very complex history behind the destruction of the Mau and what I will call the political intricacies behind the Mau destructions was calling for a very different approach. It was calling for a much more step-by-step, very cautious, all-inclusive approach to make sure that we can move and start restoring the Mau Forest Complex. Now, the public-private partnership approach that was so successfully implemented in the Aberdares and Mount Kenya, as I mentioned to you, was then tried in the Mao, in the smallest forest block in the Mao, which is called Monte Buru. That was initiated by us, RANOAC, in 2013. And amazing enough, today we are only 5 years on the road. And I can tell you that that initiative has truly transformed not only the forest, but also the wider landscape. And if you go now to Eburu, and I will be so happy to welcome you over there, together with the Kenya Forest Service, you will see that the communities has been fully engaged in the protection and management of that forest. You will see that the potential of that forest to become a key tourist destination has been fully identified and now is being implemented. The forest is now conserved, and actually we are now working on plan to make Eburu Forest, that was in the past a charcoal production site. We are now in the plan of making it becoming a sanctuary for the most critically endangered antelope in the world, which is the mountain bongo antelope. You must know that there are less than 100 bongo antelope in the wild, all in Kenya, and we have some few of them in Mao Eburu. In addition to that, we have also worked on the connectivity in the wider landscape, and now we have established a corridor, a wildlife corridor linking Mao forest to Lake Nevasha, enabling wildlife to move up and down, and making sure that the wider landscape approach is actually being implemented in that specific part of the Mao. Now, as Jordi told you very well, 3 years ago, a new PPP initiative, acronym PPP initiative actually, because this is really the jargon that we really believe into it at RANOAC, but a public-private partnership initiative was being launched and spearheaded by IDH ISLA, to which we are members in Southwest Mao, and we are very much looking forward for that initiative in Southwest Mao to be as successful as the one that has been led in Mao Eburu. But what you have to bear in mind is that while Mao Eburu was the smallest forest block in the Mao, Southwest Mao is the largest forest block in the Mao. So it brings many more challenges along the way, no doubt about that. So now if I look backwards, what has happened in Kenya? But no doubt some of the critical steps that has taken place in this country for positive change that we can now see in the country started with the government some 10 years ago to make some policy changes. And those policy changes clearly have addressed what I believe was the main threat to forest conservation in the country, which was the conversion of forest land to other land uses. And that has been addressed. I can tell you that today, if you want to excise any forest land, you need a recommendation from the board of KFS. It has to go to Parliament. You will have a public hearing process. Basically, it will be near impossible for any forest land in the country to be further excised. And I think that has been some of the major changes that took place some 10 years ago. The PPP approach that I've been relating to, the one from IDH ISLA, the one from us in the Aberdares, in Mount Kenya, and in Mao Eburu, no doubt has provided the framework for a very strong engagement of the communities and all the stakeholders in the conservation and the restoration of those forests. At the same time, they have provided lasting solutions to some of the key challenges that we are facing in those ecosystems. But there are still some gaps. There are still some gaps, in particular in the policy framework that is managing those forests in Kenya. And it was quite fortunate that actually in April this year, the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Environment and Forestry established a new task force, the Task Force on Forest Resource Management in Kenya. And I was actually part of a task force where I was actually chairing the main committee on forest conservation, and I can say that the range of recommendations made by the task force really aim at addressing the remaining policy gap to actually conserve and restore all the forest and the large forest ecosystem and landscape in the country. So as I stand here in front of you, I can say that I'm very hopeful that with those recommendations duly implemented, we might have actually the framework that will help support all stakeholders in the pathway towards forest landscape restorations. Many thanks. Those were my few words. I know that Winnie has already called me to order to make it even briefer, and many thanks for Winnie for giving me some few extra minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. With that background, I think because time is tight, I'm handing over to my colleague, Dr. Langat.
Thank you very much, Winnie, and I think the introduction has been made. We will take 30 minutes to converse here about how we got involved in the Southwest Mau. Each of the panelists on my right and my left will take 5 minutes to make a presentation or to discuss the role that they have played. And in terms, so that we can save time, I will be introducing the participant and at the same time asking the question so that we can move on. And to start us off, we'll start with a representative from the government, Alfred Gisho. Alfred Gisho is from the Kenya Forest Service. And I want to ask him, by making a statement that the government, of course, the agencies of government play a very critical role in sustainable forests. And Kenya Forest Service specifically plays a critical role. In as far as Southwest Mau Forest is concerned, can you explain or tell us how you have harnessed stakeholder participation to enhance what is essentially your legal mandate, and also how you are succeeding in managing community relationships, particularly in eradicating illegal settlements and the conflicts that may arise thereof. Mr. Ngisho.
Thank you very much, Dr. Langat. The Southwest Mau Forest, where this project is located, is a public forest. And it's a public forest whose mandate then for protection and sustainable forest management is vested in a government institution, in this case, the Kenya Forest Service. And this mandate is vested by the Forest Act. We have a new act which was enacted in 2016. But this act, by vesting that mandate, it has not given Kenya Forest Service the opportunity to exercise power. It gives Kenya Forest Service an opportunity to provide guidance, to show leadership, to provide expertise, knowing that there are very many expertise within that institution, and also to provide the necessary coordination so that that forest estate is sustainably managed in line with the requirements of government policy. How this mandate is exercised is also vested in the same act because it provides that forest planning and sustainable forest management must be done in a very consultative process. So we have a requirement that we need to engage all the stakeholders in the forest or in a forestation or in a forest estate. We need to go into a collaborative forest planning and implementation. But that said, we also understand there are issues within that forest. So how do we move forward? And I think the first thing we have done is to engage everybody, to engage the communities, to engage the communities, in this case the farmers. We know we also have private sector investors in that same ecosystem, to understand what exactly is the problem with that forest. Because sometimes we have a problem where we move very fast into prescribing solutions without an understanding of what exactly the problem is.
As you continue and finish, you've got only 1 minute. I will also want you to finish at the end by telling us about buffers and boundaries, how they stand today.
Yes, there has been a discussion on what the problem is and what we as stakeholders think should drive innovation and a transformative process that delivers change, that provides for sustainable management of that ecosystem. And this is where some of the interventions that we have been proposing and we'll keep proposing come in. But what we need to strengthen is the need for us to make sure that the strategies that we propose moving forward are also very consultatively agreed upon by all of us. We have in the past, as Kenya Forest Service, traditionally proposed some, I don't know whether you know game modes, where we were dealing with wild animals. We don't want wild animals to come very close to the people's farms, then you dig a trench. That has been overtaken by technologies. Then we proposed we were also proposing some T-belts. Then we came to fencing. We have a situation where some of us think, or most of us think that the fence at the moment may be the best way to move forward. Because if you propose, for example, another T-belt, some of us would like to associate that with a deforestation. Okay. So we talk about all these innovations to drive a transformative forest sector effort, but our ultimate goal is sustainable forest management and conservation.
Okay. Fred, I think there will be opportunities at question time for you to expound on that. I now want to move to another partner as the private sector, and I'm introducing Simeon Hutchinson and asking specifically on how the private sector came into the partnership. Listening to the earlier presentations, you might want to tell us what drove you really to putting your resources and time and attention to the issues at Southwest Mau, and really what kind of governance structure has emerged that has helped the partners to work together. And also you may touch a little bit on the co-funding program that you have between yourselves and IDH.
Thank you, Dr. Hari. Good afternoon, everyone. Now, every farmer in Bomet County and Kericho County, not just tea farmers, not just tea plantations, but every farmer is dependent on the health of the Southwest Mau. Southwest Mau is the main influence on the weather patterns there, and of course it's the only source of water for all the residents, not just the farmers. And so for many years, Finley's has been involved in a number of different initiatives aimed at reversing the degradation of Southwest Mau. And at some point it became clear that we couldn't do this alone or with one or two other partners. One has to tackle the root causes of degradation. And in order to do that, you have to involve all the stakeholders, everyone who has an interest in the forests. And that's where IDH came in. We, as Finley's, did not have the capacity or the time to engage with all the different stakeholders that IDH have been able to pull together. And so they've built this very strong coalition of partners from central government, represented by KFS, local county governments, the RUAs, the community forest associations, private sector, the sawmillers. They all have a stake, they all have an interest in what goes on in Southwest Mau. And through being able to identify the root causes, the result of degradation of Mau is the same for all of us. So we've through this program have helped identify some of the root causes and have started tackling, on a small scale, tackling some of those problems. Turning to your second point, or maybe let me talk first about the third point on the funding. That is always going to be a challenge, and I think the key here is to get the private sector particularly, but also the government, county governments, central government, to really look at the bigger picture and understand the cost. What would the cost be of losing the Mao? And I think one of the questions in one of the other discussion groups was, you know, the cost of not doing anything, the cost of losing these forests is far greater than the cost of actually trying to protect them and stop the degradation. Dr. Hari, remind me your second question?
The governance structures.
The government structures.
You're a founder member. And
so we've mentioned already that there's this very wide coalition of partners. We formed an interim board in which each of those partners had representation. And then more recently, a trust called the Stawisha Mao Trust has been established. Three trustees initially, but I think now expanding to 7, is that? Five. So it's a model that's been borrowed largely from the Imarisha project around Navasha, which has been very successful. So each of the stakeholders has a representation through this structure.
Thank you very much. I move on to grassroots leadership, local leadership. We have with us the Honorable Clara Chirotich, who is a member representing Kimulod Ward, where in the presentation that was made earlier, you saw the water project where people were collecting water. And I want to ask, well, we celebrated together in terms of the success of that project, which was sponsored by parties in this coalition, where the project was completed. You may want to share with us how it's going, how the communities are benefiting, and how you look to managing it in future. And then, because you're a politician, you may want to tell us, we sometimes get mixed messages from politicians. We don't know whether they actually support conservation in the Mao. What's your view, and what are your colleagues saying? A few of those matters you may touch on.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Langat. I'm Honorable Clara Cherotich Koech, member of County Assembly, Bomet County, and I'm so grateful to be part of this forum. I represent the people of Kimula Tuad, a community which is a beneficiary to the partner Isla in collaboration with Findlay, and I thank the MD and the leadership. I feel proud and honored to the recently completed and commissioned water project, which was built by Isla in collaboration with Findlay. The water project, which is called Kipchabos, is the best gift to my people and the whole community. It has really benefited the community to get access to clean drinking water, which is free from germs and dirt. It has also made my fellow women to smile, because the project has eased the congestion due to the high volume of clean water and also the clean environment within the river source. It has created a good scenario, and the places look so beautiful, and we are guarding the project jealously, especially as women of the community who feel the pain of fetching water. Being a member of, to my second question, being a member of County Government of Bomet, I'm also an agent to our Governor, Madam Laposo, who is on a manifesto. The 7-point plan agenda is environmental restoration. I will offer our partners the goodwill political environment to work in, and together we restore the destroyed landscape. It's the best practice in our county, and especially to my ward, Kimulat ward. Also, according to my view, as far as commitment to sustainable environment, I personally is a friend and a neighbor to the forest, and to James Findlay, who are putting great effort to conserve environment and the rainforest. And I really support, I support the project, I support the conservation. As a political leader, who is also a member of environmental committee services in the assembly, I want to laud the joint efforts by the government and partners in conserving the environment, and especially the Mao forest. I would like to be held in records that I support the punitive measures to be taken by both arms of the government, that is the county government and the national government, to anyone found against measures of conserving and restoring the landscape. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. We want to note for those who are visitors to Kenya that the Kenyan Constitution we have two levels of government. A national government, which handles certain functions, including functions connected to the Kenya Forest Service, and the county government, which has got some very specified, devolved function. Bomet County, which is one of the counties we operate in, is actually, the governor there is a woman leader, and just like the county assembly leader we have here. Now we move on to actual interventions that we have done, and we want to ask Barbara. Barbara is from University Kenya. University Kenya, and her name is Barbara Kenya. So she will pick up from there and explain a bit on a program we called Adapt a Forest, in which private sector or several companies took up sections of the forest that had been destroyed, and with the assistance of KFS, and actually replanted those areas. Barbara.
Okay, thanks everyone. Yeah, so welcome to Kenya. This is Kenya, welcome East Kenya. Yeah, so basically, just as Simeon has just mentioned, we were in a position where there was not much as a private sector we could do about the MAU, and there was no platform provided then. And through this program, there was a platform provided to help us support the MAU project. As Simeon just mentioned, it is actually the lifeline for the livelihood in the whole of that area in Kericho. It's actually the tea plantation's lifeline. And with the degradation going on, there's not much we could do. So this platform was provided, and through this, Unilever and the key stakeholders came into partnership, and through the structures and the governance provided, we have involved the local communities through the community forest associations. So whereby, one, there's a direct impact on economic benefit for the community through the seedlings being bought from them. There's also beehives that they are using and generating honey from, and that's a socioeconomic direct impact in terms of their income. Through this, they see the need to conserve the forest, because with the beehives, and they have the trees, and the honey is there, and that helps us in enforcing that. The other thing is, because we involve them, and through the expertise of the Kenya Forest Service, being the competent persons in selection of trees and planting, and the technical expertise we rely on them for, this is a sustainable way that we are able to conserve the MAU forest and have a huge impact towards that. We also use the community to buy seedlings from, as I mentioned. They run tree nurseries. So that also is, in a wholesome cycle, something that helps them support the project, as opposed to it being a one-way, either just government or private sector. They actually own, they provide the labor for the forest, for the tree planting activities, they provide the seedlings. They also maintain these trees until they are nurtured to a point that, they are now sustainable and grow, as opposed to the days when we would plant trees and walk away and then come back and there's nothing out of that. So this has been a more sustainable way and approach, and a more integral approach. There's also empowerment within the community in various activities and aspects. So they do understand why they should select the trees, why they should conserve the trees, and they are realizing the benefits with time as we go through.
Thank you, Barbara. Last but not least, we will move on to Beata. Before she speaks, I want to say that when we did the study specific for Southwest Mau, we found that when the government had moved the people who had settled, encroached illegally on the land, and they have remained largely, there are no settlements now, there is no cultivation going on. But cattle grazing continues, and we estimate over 24,000 head of cattle actually is still in the deforested areas, and therefore natural regeneration was not taking place. As we continue to discuss other things about fencing and putting the buffers and planting the trees, we thought it necessary to have a livestock intensification program which Beata runs. Beata works for SNV and SNV is contracting the project to run a livestock intensification program. So that's the explanation why we are dealing with livestock as a livelihood than a program than any other. But Beata, how do you see the program being adopted by the community? And do you have specific examples and quick wins you can share with us?
Thank you so much, Daktari. I'll begin by answering why livestock. As I mentioned earlier, livestock is a major source of livelihood by forest community-dependent, communities in southwest Mau. At the same time, it's a major source of forest degradation. These two things, especially on the livelihoods, when you look at production of livestock within the community members, when we did a study in 2016, we established that livestock grazing in the forest, especially dairy cows, were producing 2 liters of milk per day. And the cost of producing a liter of milk grazing in the forest is 16.5 shillings, Kenyan shillings. So 2 liters will give you 27 shillings max. And that is from 1 cow per day. And that is not even enough to feed 2 kids in the community where we work in. As an alternative grazing method where the community members can graze their animals at home, they'll spend 22 shillings to graze their animals at home, and they'll be able to produce 12 liters. So the idea of the livestock intensification component is to offer an alternative grazing method where community members can graze their animals at home, they can produce more milk, they can sell, they can increase their incomes, at the same time reduce forest overgrazing in southwest Mau block. Quick wins, yes, we've got community members now grazing less and less in the forest. We have got community members selling the large herds of cattle they had and keeping less and more productive animals at home. We've had community members growing fodder at home and grazing, managing their livestock from home. And today we are joined by one of the beneficiaries of our project, and I'll engage him. Unfortunately, I love to talk in Swahili, but Daktari will translate. I just want us to hear from him what has changed, what was it like before the project. And I'll ask, he's called Daniel Langat.
Anaitwa, okay, sorry. you go.
So, Bwana Daniel, ni kwa nini mlikuwa mnalisha ng'ombe kwa msitu na nini imebadilika tangu mradi uanze? Na changamoto gani mlikuwa nayo wakati mnalisha ng'ombe msituni?
The question to Daniel is why were you grazing in the forest, and what challenges were you facing when you were grazing in the forest, and with getting involved in the project, what changes have taken place?
Yeah, asante. Tulipopata mafundisho tukajua shida ya msituni, ukipeleka ng'ombe ipati maziwa, ya pili ipati chumvi na chakula. Ukipeleka ng'ombe karibu 20 msituni, tukajua unakamua 2 liters ama 3 liters kwa ng'ombe 7. Ukichunga nyumbani, upatie maji, upatie chumvi na chakula ile ingine, inakupa lita 10 na kuelekea juu ng'ombe moja. Tukaona tulipofundishwa tukajua umuhimu ng'ombe ikae nyumbani na ukatekate mashamba ikue kwota ndiye ng'ombe ipate nyazi, ipate maji na ile chakula ingine.
Okay. He has explained that when they started taking part in the training, and the training he explains that the cattle, of course, which are grazing in the forest, were not getting supplements, they were not getting any vitamins, they was not getting enough food. And for his case, he has a herd of 20 cows, and those which were being milked were actually producing, 7 of those 20 cows were being milked, and he was getting 3 liters. But when he started learning about keeping the cattle at home, the cattle is now able to produce 10 liters per cow. And he has continued to learn the progress of how to manage the grass in his own farm.
Daniel, pia unaweza tuambia ni changamoto gani mlikuwa mnapata wakati mlikuwa mnalisha ng'ombe kwa msitu hapo mbeleni?
Maybe Daniel, you can expand on the problems you actually experience when you are grazing in the forest.
Kwanza ng'ombe yetu ilikuwa inaenda msituni, inaumwa na ile kupe ya msituni. Ng'ombe inakufa kwa wingi. Unaita daktari anakuta kama ulikuwa na ng'ombe 25, 5 imeshakufa. Iko kupe ya msituni ikinyonya ng'ombe inaua. Ya pili, familia zetu ama watoto wetu kutoka kwangu paka niingie msituni ni 2 kilometers. Mama anapeleka ng'ombe asubuhi, anawacha msituni. Saa 8 anaenda kutafuta. Sasa shida ilikuwa ni labda inanyesha. Ya pili, unakuta hata wanyama wa msituni imeshatoka. Sasa mama anateseka sana. Ukikuta wakati huo bibi zetu alikuwa amekonjeka sana, ama alikuwa ana kilo, lakini sasa amekuwa na afya mzuri. Kwa sababu sasa ile shida ya kukimbia msituni, jioni amekaa nyumbani na amepata maziwa. Sasa watoto wanakunywa maziwa na tumepata pesa.
Okay. He explains from his family position that from his home to the forest, where he was grazing, it is 2 kilometers. And it is his wife who used to go to the forest, goes in the morning, comes, leaves the kettle there, comes back, goes back again in the afternoon. Sometimes it is raining, and there were wild animals there. And his wife was really in bad shape. She lost a lot of weight and wasn't looking very good. But right now, she spends a lot of time at home and has regained her health.
Asante, na mwisho ndakuuliza labda ufafanue manufaa gani umeweza kupata kwa mradi kwa kulisha ng'ombe nyumbani, na pia kama kikundi ni mikakati gani mmeweka kuweza kuchunga msitu wa Mau ambao uko kando yenu?
The question is just now, as a final question, if you can really say what you have done on the farm specifically to improve cattle keeping, and particularly the group that you belong, what progress have you made? If you can tell us.
Okay, asante. Tulianza na watu 20 na sasa watu wameongezeka, ameingia kikundi chetu. Karibu watu sasa wameongezeka kutoka 20 mpaka 50. Na tumeona tukiwa tunaendeleza ile grupu yetu ya kuchunga ng'ombe, tumepata faida ya kwanza ni pesa. Tumeuza maziwa yetu na tuko na pesa. Ya pili, tuko na ng'ombe 3, sio 25, na hiyo inatosha mahitaji ya nyumbani, watoto wanasoma. Tunachunga sasa msitu yetu kwa sababu maji ni uhai. Sasa tumeamua sisi kama wakaaji wa huko Mau tuchunge msitu, maji itoke ile maji safi, tukunywe na ng'ombe yetu ashibe. Tumefurahia sana mafundisho.
Okay.
Sasa,
yeah. Endelea tu.
Okay. Tulipopata mafundisho, watu sasa akaona ni kama ilikuwa na giza na mchana ikaingia. Sasa amejua ukweli ya kuchunga ng'ombe nyumbani, na wakati ule tulikuwa tukipeleka msituni. Sasa tumewachana na mambo ya msituni, ikuwe ya wanyama na miti, na maji itoke huko. Lakini sisi tumechunga.
Ile vitu mnafanya kwa shamba ni nini?
Okay, tunapanda Nevia grass, tunapanda ile nyasi yetu tunaitaka Kikuyu, tunapanda hii nyasi ya kawaida iko yetu tunaitaka mimi nafikiria atasema hiyo jina yetu ya seretio, tunaitaka seretio. Ile ng'ombe ikikula inatoa maziwa kabisa.
Okay. The group actually was designed to be 20 training in one demonstration farm. But he says now there are more than 50 people who have come volunteering, who are not part of the members of the group, when they saw the progress that was arising from the fact that the people in the program were now selling milk. So they are happy to keep off the forest and for this particular group and himself specifically, because they have seen the benefits of when there are no interference in the forest, there's clean water. He mentions that it's like they've actually been enlightened, and they planted fodder, specifically Napier grass for his farm, I think it's also planted silage. And specifically I think what they are doing is they planted the grass which is called ceratiot, but scientifically it's known around the world as Kikuyu grass, which is still a Kenyan name, which is very good for raising cattle. And that was actually the last question. Thank you, Beata. Winnie, I think we finished. You can pick up from there.
So I hope you found our story informative, and now we open up for questions. We have some 20 minutes. Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Parashina. I work with the South Region Association of Landowners based in Kajiado and Narok. Thank you very much for the presentations. I think we've learned a lot from all the speakers. One might be tempted to ask everybody a question, but let me, in the interest of time and the sake of others, to just ask one. That goes to KFS. My question is, was buffering with T, the T zones, the best scientific mechanism to, or a physical mechanism to deter people from encroaching to the forest? And secondly, in the past years, we had, even I think was the director, complaining of the T-zones and going beyond the allowed areas and doing more than they were given in terms of acreage and the size of the buffer. So how did you deal with that? And what was the mechanisms to actually ensure that these T-zones were specifically for the purposes of Kenya T-zone, but not for maybe individuals in terms of taking away the public land? Thank you.
Thank you, Farashina. I think we'll take another 2 or 3 questions and then.
Thank you very much. I'm Kevin Juma from the Nature Conservancy. My question, thank you very much again for wonderful presentation and collaborative efforts you have for restoring Mau. My question goes to the Honorable MCA. Mau is, there's a lot of political issues around restoration and conservation of Mau. And any misplaced pronouncement will erode all the gains that you people are making. How do you rally your colleagues, especially not only the MCAs, but do you have some efforts to have a common agenda with maybe MPs, senators, to have a common goal of restoring Mau? Because without the political buy-in, all these efforts will be eroded. Thank you.
Kevin, we had Mike over there.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I really want to also applaud the good work and the beautiful collaboration between many organizations for this particular project. But I want to understand, most of the presentations you've given, I've understood, is more of within the forest and just the surrounding community. I wish to understand whether you have any initiatives to involve any communities downstream, or, I mean, and if so, to what extent from the forest line, and maybe whether we need to also look for other partners to collaborate that so that it's a whole landscape and more of the benefits downstream, or is just around the forest area. Thank you.
Thank you. Allow us to respond to these ones, and then we will take another set of questions. I saw your hands at the back. So I think, Alfred, you start.
Yeah, thank you very much. The issue of tea and whether it was scientifically driven, because I know this is something that was done in the 90s, and as Kenya Forest Service and as a government in general, we were exploring the best opportunities for conserving, especially our natural forests. We were looking at the best opportunity for us to conserve them so that they can, in perpetuity, generate the environmental services for which we were managing them. Previously, I said we were also looking at other avenues. But as a government, I think it may not be scientific, but we were in agreement within the government that we needed to identify a crop that could provide a buffer to support that conservation. And the issue of tea was agreed on precisely because we were looking at a buffer that could also generate a livelihood support system for the neighboring communities. And this is how the government proceeded with establishing especially a 100-meter buffer. Whether this was honored or not, I think all of us Kenyans can answer that. We had areas where some people extended that buffer beyond 100 meters. Too much politics then. I think we all know where we are coming from. But the subsequent discussions have informed us that perhaps that may not be the best way to go to protect our forest resources. We know tea is an agricultural crop, and we know some of these agricultural crops or agricultural commodities can also very easily drive deforestation. So we are now exploring other avenues for us to provide the same protection. Some of them traditional, enforcing protection, but we are also talking about perhaps the possibility of erecting an electric fence that could provide the same support that we are looking for.
Thank you, Alfred. I believe that answers. So the two can also be complementary. But now we move to the question from Mike, which was directed to Clara, to talk about, the role of politicians in conservation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mike. About the issue of coming together as a national and county government, I would like to inform you that recently we had a visit to Narok County, our neighboring county, with our Madam Governor, and we met with leaders from Narok County. We had gone to maybe to see the Mau effectees, to talk to them, educative forum about the conservation of the forest, and also to inform them to make peace with the neighboring people. And the two governors, they are planning to have a joint forum with the national leaders, and now soon we shall be all, and we will discuss way forward about the Mau conservation. And as I said earlier, we are in support of conserving the Mau. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very crucial role for our leaders, and that sounds very active and involved, so we appreciate. We had a question from Mike who wants to understand how we are working downstream. I will take this one. So we made a very clear decision to work on the top catchment of the Sondo River Basin, where the water comes out of, which is, of course, within and just outside the Southwest Mau forest block. And why did we do that? Our assessment based on our studies was that most of the issues were at the top, and the top is also the most sensitive ecosystem as far as especially the water is concerned. We have had a lot of so we work with at the top with the Kericho, Nakuru, and Bomet counties. We know there's potential to work with more counties downstream, and that might come, but we are very clear that we work with these three for a start and solve the problems at the top. But yeah, we have been challenged to look beyond that, but then we also need to focus. So that's the reasoning behind it. The gentleman, yes?
Thank you. Excuse me, I'm Arne Witt. I'm from CABI. I'm an invasion biologist. I'd like to commend you all on the good work you're doing. It really sounds really positive and clearly the way to go. I'm very curious to know, there wasn't any mention of invasive species as posing a threat to biodiversity or water resources. And having been to those areas and surveyed them, I'm aware of a number of invasive species that are encroaching on those water catchments. And work done elsewhere in the world, particularly in South Africa, has indicated that water catchments invaded by pines or wattles can reduce water flow or stream flows by 80% and more. So I'm very curious to know, are invasive species being looked at or considered or being managed in any way in terms of protecting these water catchments?
Thank you. The lady at the corner.
Thank you. My name is Selma van der Haar. I'm from C4 Nairobi. I had a question about the way forward. What plans do you have to scale out this project or to improve it? And are there any knowledge gap, any research you would be interested in doing? If so, we're next door, so.
Yes, thank you. William.
I'm Koros William, the chairperson Itare Chemosit Water Resource Users Association. And during the year 2014, I managed to know Isla. And we have done a very great work with them. The only issue that I wanted to point to Dr. Langat is that we realized in 2014 that everything starts and ends with the community. And we were promised about the no-regret projects when we met about 15 rowers of Sondu Basin. Then those projects were not realized. My question is, shall they be realized in the near future or it was done away with? Thank you.
Yeah, a good number of questions. I think we take them first. And I will welcome Alfred with your expertise as a forester to comment on the invasive species. And Christian can also support that discussion.
I'm not aware that the discussion on invasive species is informing activities within the area that we are discussing today. But the wider agenda in this country on forest is one that recognizes the issue of invasive species as important. And we know that with climate change especially impacting on our forested ecosystems, we have seen invasive species taking sometimes complete dominance of some of the ecosystems. And one now needs to go and visit some areas of Kakamega forest to see what we are talking about. Within some of the arid and semi-arid lands, we have some big problem with the prosopis. And water resources is one of the areas where that is likely to suffer, and the need for us to invest heavily in their management and control. In terms of the way forward, what we have done in the recent past is to identify a number of ongoing forest and landscape restoration initiatives that are successful and that we think we can replicate in other areas of this country. And we see the ISRA project as one that can very easily be replicated in other forested area, and especially the water towers of our country. So we are taking stock of some of these initiatives, especially the successful one. But we want to see if we can tweak them a bit so that they can even deliver more value And these are the activities that shall be using to inform activities moving forward on forest and landscape restoration. Thank you.
Yeah, Christian, do you want to add some comments? I know Lantana Camara was an issue in the Karura forest.
Yes, many thanks. Exactly, Winnie. I would say that invasive species can be a major challenge when restoration through natural regenerations is being envisaged. And we had the case on Mount Kenya, in particular in the Imenti forest. The Imenti forests were being invaded by local farmers in 1997, and then they were basically asked to vacate the forest in 1999. And then the plan was that the forest will come back by itself, and we will get back a closed canopy forest in that specific part of Mount Kenya. As it happened, the entire area got invaded by Lantana Camara, and as we speak now, Kenya Forest Service, together with the Mount Kenya Trust and ourselves, we are currently engaging local farmers to remove, which is quite a very difficult task, Lantana Camara, and to replant very actively trees to make sure that the forest can be fully restored. So there are some specific areas where actually it has become a major challenge.
Thanks, Christian. We use the technical expertise, of course, of Kenya Forest Service to make sure we are planting the right species. So they are on board to advise us exactly which trees to plant. There was a question from C4 about the way forward. I think we stay in the southwest Mau for some time. Our funding is until 2020. Currently, we are looking for more support, so maybe we do another 2 or 3 years beyond 2020. And we want to develop a proper, scalable, innovative prototype before we can go elsewhere. Because as Christian mentioned, it takes a long time to do that. And we are also making sure that we have the exit strategy that we require for this to continue beyond donor funding. So we have some work to do. We actually did work with C4 to do the baseline at the beginning. So yeah, we've already been involved with you, and C4 is a member of the board through Esther and colleagues before that. So thanks. The next set of questions, I think the final three.
Let me answer, William.
Oh, sorry, I was forgetting William.
Yeah. How are you, William? You were with us right in the very beginning. What William refers to as no regret projects was what this group here, at the initial stages when we were still forming the coalition, thought that as we are planning, we need to do some things which we probably, if they go wrong, we wouldn't regret. That's why he was calling them no regrets projects. What happened really is that, we work with partners. The ones on the no regrets projects in the forest, together with our partner then, who was now KFS, and the private sector companies, that translated into what has been referred to as adapter forest, which was reported by Barbara in her presentation. The water projects, the leadership for those water projects went to GIZ, who was also working with private sector companies and the county governments. And it became necessary for a different mode of consultation to be taken, and therefore some of the items which were listed by the rural associations were not done. But a very large number has been done and is ongoing. You just saw in the presentation what Mheshimiwa represents, what was done in spring protection at Kipchobos, and there are more than 10 other projects which are taking place in various places. But the initial program that we had created, we shifted away, and because we needed the county government to show us what they had identified first, and then we used the technical capacity of GIZ to design the work that we were doing, and together with the private sector, Finlays and Unilever and the rest, we were able to complete that work. So we didn't follow the list as had been created with the RUAs at that point in time.
Thank you, and sorry I was nearly forgetting. I think we take the last 3 questions. The lady next to William.
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Kuki Njero. I come from Greenport Enterprises. I wanted to ask just one question about the pressure that we have in our forests right now is because of the wood fuel that we require as a country, 87%. And we have gotten to the counties and we're going to be having a lot of urbanization and construction happening. So other than conserving and preserving, other than protecting and reconstructing the forest and restoring it, what are you going to do as a project to make sure that the pressure has been taken out of the forest, yet the demand is still there? Thank you.
Your hand has been up, yeah?
Thank you. Rocio Diaz from the Stockholm Environment Institute. We are based here at GLF, it's the Africa Center. And I would like to know if you could expand a little bit on the aspects of sustainable energy in this kind of landscape governance, not just charcoal, but which other aspect could be included. We know that several of the tea companies are doing something else to incorporate sustainable energy into their activities. So how it is handled also to maybe also supply the local communities.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, your hand has been up at the back, the lady.
Thank you. My name is Svea Senesi. I'm from FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and more specifically from the Forest and Farm Facility. And it seems we have a very similar approach, and we work particularly with farmers' organizations, as cooperatives, and so on. My question is on the approach for gender equality. We heard good examples how women are benefiting in your landscape. But I think especially when we talk about social inclusion and equity, I would be very interested in how the general approach looks like. Besides benefiting the women, how are they included in the decision making, the planning and implementation? Thank you.
Good. I think we take those three. Cookie asked about biomass, also with the pressure on forest for wood fuel and timber. We have looked at this issue, and it links into the issue of sustainable energy also for drying tea. One of the attempts we made was to look at the business case for using geothermal energy, so heat out of the ground to dry tea. We just had that study done by some experts. It proves to be it's viable, but it's very expensive. So we are looking at other ways also with the tea sector to look at concentrated solar power and options like that to see if that can be used for drying tea. We have also looked at the bamboo value chain in terms of that biomass being used for briquettes, for drying tea as well, and as well as cooking at the homesteads. We talk to the tea sector here, and I will ask Simeon and Barbara, maybe they have more comments there. The current technology is not very compatible with using biomass from bamboo because it forms a lot of clinker, a lot of ash, and because of the way their boilers are designed, that's not working very well at the moment. It is still on the table as an option to explore going forward. But we may need to link that into what technology we would use to do that. We have a plan to work with communities. Unilever and Finlays are already working with communities both on their plantation, but also outside their plantation on what wood fuel they are using, what technology they are using. So, Simeon, do you want to give a comment?
Thanks, Winnie. I think your question was directed more at the sort of householder, the smallholder level, the community. So within the farm, we have been working to introduce fuel-efficient stoves, eco-friendly stoves. For many years, we've tried building our own using the clay that we have, and for some reason, we haven't been able to attain the efficiencies required, certainly to qualify for carbon credits. So more recently, we've actually move towards an off-the-shelf package. I think there's a number of different suppliers producing these small portable stoves, which based on the rocket design, and we've been inserting those into the village, our workers' villages over the last 6 months or so. In terms of spreading that out beyond us, it's still the early days, but if we're successful, then I think our intention would be to work with smallholders from whom we buy leaf on that basis as well.
Good. Then there was a question from FAO about, or Barbara, you want?
Just to add on to what Simeon is saying, in the tea sector, we work together a lot. So in the fuel efficiency stoves, we are also trying that out together with James Finley's. We also are rolling out solar panels, a solar plant within our plantation to complement on energy. We also have a hydro plant that we provide electricity for, and we are targeting 100% briquette firing in our boilers. So in line with what you're asking, that's where we are.
Yeah, I was moving on to the question on gender. We very actively make sure that women are represented, especially at the farmer level, at the training level. Beata will tell you we had a set of criteria when we selected the farmers to be involved in that pilot on livestock intensification. And we made the effort to purposely make sure we had at least 30% women in there, as well as the youth. So that is very well being taken care of. You see a lot of women involved here. There are also women on our board all the way to the trustee level. We are very actively making sure that that is considered. I am apologizing because we overshoot by a few minutes, but it's an interesting conversation. We promised we had a question for you, and this for us is around sustaining this program into the long term beyond donor funding. We have made quite some effort in terms of how we structure it with local partners, with local interests, with the government who have a long-term interest to manage this, with the trust as the legal entity to go forward, and resources that are being organized for that trust to run. But we would like to ask from the participants here if you have any ideas, any suggestions for something that has worked very well that we can take on board in terms of making sure we can entrench this. And it's not just running for the time we are here with external funding, but very important that it goes to the long term. Yes, FAO. Sorry, I call you FAO because I didn't catch your name.
It's okay, Svea. Thank you. No, I just mentioned before that we work with, we call it producer organizations, cooperatives, whatever that might look like, and we have very good examples that when you institutionalize such projects in these structures that already exist, be it cooperatives, farmers' unions, and I don't know how it looks like in your county, but I'm sure in Kenya, or I know in other counties in Kenya, they also have these structures, smallholders, producer associations, and so on, that when you try to include them from the beginning and also institutionalize your approaches there, that there's a high rate of sustainability. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you. Very interesting for our livestock work with the milk cooperatives, which we are already working in. So we take that into consideration. More suggestions? Yes?
Thank you for this opportunity. What I saw is that IDH, you did very good in enhancing this public-private partnership, PPP. But my suggestion is maybe you could go further to establish that is a private sector partnership in conservation. It means that you can spearhead on how you can engage other private sector so that they can contribute in conservation, so that you can support KFS in conservation issues. Like there's a different industries which use maybe water. Also there's a flower farmers and others who use water from forests, from the catchment. So you can also involve those or support those that may you please engage or partner with maybe ADH so that you can have a lot of source of fund which you can use for supporting maybe KFS and the other livelihood issues in conservation. Thank you.
Good point to continue involving more and more private sector. We have the tea sector, we have KenGen, we have Safaricom Foundation, but we challenge ourselves to include more. Yes?
This is a bit daring. In Kenya, you know, we have levies for quite a number of things, and more recently, fuel levies. In the Vision 2030, restoring of landscapes, especially the water towers, is included there, but nobody ever gave the solution on how we're going to get the funding. And in restoration, the biggest thing is funding, not the goodwill. People want to do it, the money is the problem. Idea again, can we have a levy somewhere in terms of our policy? When we're working on the policy, I know there's a number of environmental policies being worked on. Can we include a levy that collects funds for restoration of landscapes? Because, as you said, when we degrade, what you're losing is greater than what we'll spend in terms of monetary terms, so maybe.
Yes, thank you, very interesting. We have thought about it for water. Okay. I think we must close now. The room is going to be used by the next group. But yeah, thank you very much. It's been very interesting. We have a booth. You're welcome to visit us tomorrow and learn more, discuss more with us. Thank you.